The Cruel Stepmother and the Hidden Kindness. Once upon a time, in a quaint village surrounded by rolling hills and lush forests, there lived a kind and hard-working farmer named Thomas. He lived in a modest farmhouse with his beloved wife, Clara, and their bright, spirited son, Jack. Clara was the light of Thomas's life, and their home was filled with love, warmth, and laughter. Sadly, Clara fell ill and passed away, leaving Thomas and young Jack heartbroken. Years went by. Though the pain of losing Clara never truly faded, Thomas knew he had to move forward, for Jack's sake. Eventually, he met a woman named Margaret. Margaret was beautiful and graceful, with a soft voice that could charm anyone. They soon married, and Margaret moved into the farmhouse with her 2 children, Alice and Henry. Thomas hoped this new family would bring healing and harmony. At first, Margaret seemed like a blessing. She took charge of the household with ease, and her children quickly adapted to their new home. It felt like a fresh beginning. But as time passed, Margaret's true nature slowly revealed itself. She became harsh and demanding, especially toward Jack. While Alice and Henry enjoyed the best food, fine clothes, and lovely toys, Jack was left with only the bare minimum. The boy who once laughed freely grew quiet and withdrawn. Margaret made sure Jack's days were filled with hardship. While Alice and Henry ate warm porridge drizzled with honey, Jack received nothing more than a crust of bread. If he complained, Margaret would scold him coldly. "Be grateful you have anything at all." During the day, while Alice and Henry played freely in the fields, Jack cleaned the entire house, tended the animals, and repaired broken tools. Margaret watched him with a cold smile, ensuring he never rested. And whenever Jack showed signs of exhaustion, she added more chores. "You must learn the value of hard work," she would say mockingly. When winter arrived and snow began to fall, Margaret bought fine wool coats for Alice and Henry, tailored by the village's best craftsmen. Jack, however, was given his late mother's old, tattered shawl. "This should be enough for you," Margaret sneered. The cold was unbearable. Jack's fingers went numb as he chopped wood and fetched water from the frozen well. Wrapped in their warm coats, Alice and Henry mocked him, calling him the Ice Boy. At night, Jack was forced to sleep alone in the drafty attic, while the others enjoyed warm beds and thick blankets. The attic was dark and lonely, filled with cobwebs and the sound of whistling wind. One night, Jack overheard Margaret telling her children, "Remember, my darlings, you are special and deserve the best." Jack must learn his place. Her words pierced his heart. Margaret's cruelty was not only physical, it was emotional. She belittled Jack in front of her children, calling him clumsy and comparing him cruelly to Henry. Inspired by their mother, Alice and Henry began to torment him, hiding his belongings, pushing him into the mud, laughing at his pain. Jack loved to draw. Using scraps of paper and charcoal, he sketched the farm and nature around him. One day, Margaret found his drawings and tore them apart. "You're wasting time," she said coldly. "Get back to work." From then on, Jack hid his art, withdrawing in secret places where he could escape her cruelty, even for a moment. Despite everything, Jack remained resilient. He found comfort in the animals, especially an old, gentle horse named Whisper. Jack would talk to her, sharing his dreams and sorrows. One day, Jack overheard Margaret boasting to a neighbor, "Managing a household is easy when you have a child like Jack to do all the work. My Alice and Henry deserve the best." That was the moment Jack knew he could no longer stay silent. That evening, when Thomas returned from the fields, Jack gathered his courage. "Father, I need to talk to you," he said, his voice trembling. "Margaret treats me like a servant. She gives Alice and Henry everything and leaves me with nothing." Thomas hesitated. Margaret had always seemed kind, but Jack's tears spoke louder than words. Reluctantly, Thomas followed Jack into the kitchen. There, he saw the truth with his own eyes. Alice and Henry enjoying a lavish meal, while Jack sat with only a piece of bread. "Margaret," Thomas said firmly, "what is the meaning of this?" Caught off guard, Margaret tried to smile. "Oh, Thomas, Jack prefers simple food. Don't you, Jack?" Jack shook his head. "No, Father. I just want to be treated the same." At that moment, Thomas's heart filled with anger and regret. "This is unacceptable," he said sternly. Thomas stood frozen for a moment, staring at the table. The difference was impossible to ignore. Plates filled with warm stew and bread sat before Alice and Henry, while Jack's hands rested empty except for a dry crust. Thomas slowly turned to Margaret. "All this time," he said quietly, "you told me our home was filled with fairness." Margaret's smile faltered. "You're misunderstanding," she replied quickly. "Jack exaggerates. Children do that." Jack lowered his eyes, his small hands trembling. Thomas knelt beside his son. "Look at me, Jack," he said gently. "Tell me the truth. Have you been hungry?" Jack nodded. "Almost every day, Father." The words hit Thomas harder than any blow. Memories flooded back, Jack growing quieter, thinner, less joyful. He realized now that his grief had blinded him. That night, Thomas insisted everyone eat the same meal. Margaret sat stiffly, her anger hidden behind silence. Over the following days, Thomas began to watch. He noticed how Jack worked from sunrise to sunset, while Alice and Henry rested. He saw how Margaret's voice sharpened only when she spoke to Jack. He noticed the attic, cold, bare, and unfit for a child. The truth could no longer be denied. One evening, Thomas called Margaret aside. "This ends now," he said firmly. "Jack is my son. He will be treated with respect, warmth, and love." Margaret's eyes hardened. "You're choosing him over me?" she hissed. "I'm choosing what's right," Thomas replied. From that day on, things began to change. Jack was given a proper bed. He ate warm meals. His chores were shared equally. For the first time in years, he slept without shivering. Margaret, however, grew distant and bitter. Her control over the household slipped, and her charm no longer worked. Alice and Henry, seeing their mother corrected, slowly stopped mocking Jack. Confused at first, they began to see him not as a servant, but as a brother. One afternoon, Thomas found Jack drawing behind the barn. Instead of tearing the paper away, Thomas sat beside him. "These are beautiful," he said softly. Jack looked up, surprised. "You really think so?" Thomas smiled. "Your mother would have loved them." Jack's eyes filled with tears, not of pain this time, but of relief. For the first time since Clara's passing, the farmhouse felt warm again. But Margaret's story was not yet finished. Margaret changed after that day. Not loudly, not suddenly, but slowly and silently. She spoke less. She no longer watched Jack with cold satisfaction. Instead, there was distance in her eyes, like someone realizing the power they once held was gone. The farmhouse felt different. Mornings were quieter. Meals were shared without sharp words. Margaret did what was required, but no more. The warmth she once pretended to show never returned. Jack noticed it too. She no longer scolded him. She no longer mocked him. But she also never apologized. One evening, as winter began to soften into spring, Margaret packed a small trunk. Alice and Henry watched in confusion. "Where are we going, Mother?" Alice asked. Margaret paused. "Back to where we came from," she said softly. "Some homes are not meant to be held together by force." Thomas stood in the doorway, saying nothing. There was no shouting, no accusations, no anger, just silence. Margaret knelt in front of Jack for the first time. She looked at him, really looked at him. "You are stronger than I expected," she said quietly. "Stronger than me." It was not an apology, but it was the closest thing to truth she had ever given. Jack said nothing. He simply nodded. And that was enough. Margaret left the farmhouse before dawn, her footsteps fading down the dirt road, carrying with her the life she had failed to protect. Alice and Henry left with her, glancing back once, uncertain, changed, older than before. The door closed. Not with a slam, but with a soft click. The farmhouse breathed again. In the days that followed, light returned to the rooms. Laughter, hesitant at first, found its way back. Thomas worked the fields. Jack drew freely, pinning his sketches to the walls. Whisper watched from the stable, calm and knowing. One night, as Jack lay in his warm bed, he realized something important. Kindness did not always arrive loudly. Justice did not always shout. Sometimes healing came quietly, when cruelty chose to leave on its own. And in that quiet space, a boy finally learned what it meant to feel safe.